Good evening, friends. Well, it's Friday once again, and I'm back with another tale from my book, Dark Fragments. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Whisper the Secret. Looking down at the quickly gathering crowd in the conference room from his position in the audiovisual booth, Sean watched as they filed in and took their seats. Not that it mattered to him, as this seminar would not use any of the equipment at his command. There were no slide presentations, no videos, and no pre-programmed audio tracks. In fact, he had been expressly instructed to shut his equipment off completely, as they did not even want ambient music before, during, or after the presentation. The only thing that showed a conference was even in progress was the VU meter at his console. His purpose for being here today was to make sure that the public address system continued to function. He watched as the meter bounced in rhythm to the sounds of the chairs sliding and purses being dropped to the floor. While he could hear nothing of the sounds in the room below, he could match the movement of the needle to what he saw. Generally, the needle hovered just above zero, indicating the low hum of quiet conversation. A cough or clearing of the throat would cause the needle to jump slightly, and a sliding chair would cause it to rise above and fall steadily back to its former position of ambient noise. Nothing really technical about it, but it was his only indicator that the microphone and amplifier at the podium were still operating correctly. As long as it continued to work, he had only to sit here. Today's seminar was a little out of the ordinary. Most times, the poster board for a seminar was loaded with fancy artwork and catchphrases intended to catch the eyes and mind of the curious. Sales techniques derived to make the average person part with hard-earned cash for information. He had seen them all, and even attended a few before deciding there was nothing more than a way for the speakers to make money. He determined that the real trick to the seminars was the money-making techniques they taught were just a gimmick to make people come to the seminars. Sure, they could work if the person trying to make $1 million in real estate had great credit or loads of cash to work with, but for the average person, it was a ruse. He wondered if he could make money holding a seminar to reveal that seminars were just scams. He laughed to himself at the thought. This one was different, though. There was no fancy advertising on the poster. It had only 3 words written on it in small white letters against a black background. The lettering of the words was done in 3-dimensional wireframe, and the size of the text made it almost unnoticeable if you weren't looking for it. It really was rather intriguing, though. Just 3 words, with no explanation or implied meaning. Whisper the Secret. He considered the words and possible meaning of the seminar. He was absently doodling on a scratch pad to pass the time. He had no talent as an artist, but instead hoped to find his own revelation through the technique of free association writing. He knew in his mind that it was unlikely that any amazing revelation would reveal itself, but nevertheless he continued to practice free association writing whenever he had nothing better to do. It had become almost a habit, and he often found himself doing it without realizing there was a pencil in his hand. The meter dropped to almost zero as the speaker stepped to the podium and the crowd became quiet. 3 rapid jerks of the needle indicated the speaker was testing the microphone to see if it worked, and then it began to bounce steadily as he spoke. Sean watched half-heartedly as his hand continued to write, keeping his eye on the VU meter while his thoughts ran free. The speaker was an average man, just under 6 feet tall, with an unremarkable build. He was neither slender nor muscular, but looked as though he was fit. His clothing was a mix of casual and business. Blue jeans, a wide leather belt, well-polished black cowboy boots, and a black pocket t-shirt were definitely casual, but the gray sport jacket said business. His mustache and goatee were neatly trimmed like his hair in an almost military manner, but there was no evidence he waxed them. He wore no jewelry other than a silver watch on his left wrist, a cheap watch, likely purchased at a department store for functionality rather than show. Overall, he didn't stand out at all, which made Sean wonder just what he knew that he was selling to others. The meter level on the VU meter dropped, and Sean looked at the speaker. He was talking in low tones now. The people in the room had all seemed to relax and were watching him intently, hanging on every word, as if they were about to learn something they'd been seeking their whole lives. No one was taking notes or moving at all. They just sat there. Then, as if on cue, they all bowed their heads as if praying. The speaker turned from the podium and exited the door at the rear of the stage. He turned and looked back at the crowd just as the door closed, and smiled. Sean knew this door led to the main hallway between the elevators and the lobby of the hotel. He wondered at the smile, and decided the guy was happy at having just made such easy money. Obviously the seminar was over, and he waited for the crowd to leave so he could prepare the room for the evening's presentations. The hotel he worked at was popular, and it was not uncommon for several seminars and presentations to be held here each day. Roughly 10 minutes passed, but none of the people attending the seminar had as yet moved or even looked up. He thought this was strange, but gave it a few more minutes just in case this was part of the seminar. When 20 minutes had passed, he called down to the host desk. "Sir, this is Sean. The speaker of the seminar left some 20 minutes ago, but the people are all just sitting there with their heads bowed," he stated to the host and conference hall manager, James. "Perhaps he hypnotized them to make his exit more grand," James asked. "I don't know, but I have another presentation in a couple hours and need to set up a conference table on the stage." "Very well, I will check it out." The host seemed miffed at actually having to leave his desk to mingle with common people. Sean hung up the phone and watched as the conference room doors opened and two ushers took their places at either side to invite the guests to leave. James, the host, walked in and made his way to the podium, where he said something to the crowd. He seemed puzzled, and Sean watched as he walked off the stage to the first row and tapped a man sitting there on the shoulder. To his surprise, the man toppled over and fell to the floor. The ushers came running up, and Sean watched as the three of them tried to revive the man. When it was obvious he wasn't going to respond, the host moved first to one guest and then another before looking up and waving at him frantically. Sean had no idea what he was saying, but it was clear there was a problem as more guests were now toppling out of their chairs. He began flipping switches on his console to power up the equipment and turned up the volume on the control booth monitor in time to hear James scream, "Call 911! They're all dead!" Sean grabbed his microphone and called back down to the host. "Are you sure they're not just sleeping?" "No, they're dead!" James was clearly starting to panic. "You don't think I don't know how to look for a pulse?" Sean waved him off and grabbed the phone from the cradle. He dialed 911 to report the emergency and stayed on the line as instructed by the operator. Clearly, they had found his claim that a room full of people had just dropped dead for no apparent reason hard to believe, as he could hear the operator discussing it with others in the background. But he also heard them dispatch emergency crews. He called to James on the microphone to let him know they were on the way. The scene in the conference room was eerie. The ushers and host were now sitting on the stage looking at the crowd in disbelief. There were still about 20 people sitting in chairs with their heads bowed, and another 10 lay on the floor where they fell. How could 30 people just sit down and die? What had the speaker said to them, and what had he done to cause this? Sean felt his mind racing as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. He hadn't really paid attention to the seminar, but he knew the speaker had never left the podium until he left the room. Therefore, he didn't do anything to the people physically. He looked over at the seminar poster on the sidewall and let his eyes relax as he took it in. There was nothing there to suggest anything at all, not even the purpose of the seminar, just the words. Whisper, the secret. What secret, and why was it whispered? Looking down at his scratch pad, Sean saw that he had written several pages worth of text. Flipping back through them, he could see nothing particularly revealing, just random thoughts and experiences. He wondered again why he even bothered with association writing. It had never given him insights to his life or daily problems. He grabbed the pad and started to toss it to the trash when a knock sounded at the door. "Thank you for spending your time with me. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to join the conversation. Well, that's all for tonight, but be sure and join me back here next Friday for another tale. Until then, sleep well.